Shabbat Shalom, Brother Emmanuel.
Shabbat Shalom. Okay, so like Maharat was saying, this is one of those weeks where you really need to just take the time to start this reading from the beginning and go to the end. This reading is actually packed with a lot of events. They seem disconnected. And I've heard some amazing drashes on each and every one of the subjects. There's the consecration of the Levites to serve inside the Mishkan. The concept of the firstborn belonging to God actually resonates throughout this reading. It's literally everywhere, hiding in unusual places. Then there are the two trumpets and their calls to assemble. Imagine a world where there's one king, and the call will go out for the elders to assemble, and they will come from all parts of the earth, every nation, tribe, and people. Adonai also commands us to blow the trumpets at other times as well. When you go to war in your land against an adversary who is oppressing you, you are to sound an alarm with the trumpets. Then you will be remembered before Adonai your God, and you will be saved from your enemies. Also, on your days of rejoicing, at your designated times, on Rosh Chodesh, you are to sound the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings. These will be a reminder before your God, I am Adonai, your God. That's in Numbers 10, 9 through 10. I included that because it's a reminder that Adonai is the one who leads the fight against our enemies, all our afflictions. He never leaves us alone. He's always there. And that is where the battle begins. The reading also gives us commandments to move when God moves the camp. Very important. To stop whenever he stops, even if it's just for a day, or a month, or a year. And this reading also gives us a tradition as old as the Exodus. Whenever the ark would set out, Moses would say, "Arise, Adonai, may your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you." And if it were up to me, I would add one more section from this reading into our liturgy. Whenever it came to rest, he would say, "Return, Adonai, to the myriad thousands of Israel." That statement, just like the one before, it still applies today, because we are waiting for the return of Adonai to the myriad thousands of Israel and Judah. This reading also gives us three events that seem unrelated, and yet they have the same corrosive effect on the mind in our believing community as well. And this is where I want to focus. You see, rebellion against God is actually baked into the nature of our carnal mind. It starts subtly with complaining and grows, eventually affecting leadership. Our carnal minds, left unchecked, can become infectious, just like we saw the viruses that ravaged through the earth this last year, these 2 years. Let's look at them. I'm going to lay this down in three pieces. The first one, the number one, is Numbers 11, 1 through 2. The people were murmuring in the ears of Adonai about hardship. There's some important clues I'm going to point out. And when Adonai heard, his anger burned. The fire of Adonai blazed among them, ravaging the outskirts of the camp, just as we heard in the reading. So do you see how it works? Two people start complaining to another person, and then it spreads like fire on the wind. Number two, this next stage is particularly nasty because it manifests itself in our bodies. The grumblers among them began to have cravings. So Bnei Israel began to wail repeatedly, saying, "If we could eat some meat, we remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for free. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now we have no appetite." That's from the Tree of Life version, Numbers 11, 4 through 6. We never see anything but this manna. All right, So we're not looking at that in detail, but we're going to go into the third case. One more event. This next stage affects the leadership, as it concerns those who are in charge. You'll see this play out in the Davidic kingdom as well, which leads in the kingdom that David created to split off into two different kingdoms and eventually be carried off into captivity. Miriam and Aaron began criticizing Moshe on account of the Ethiopian woman he had married, for he had in fact married an Ethiopian woman. They said, is it true that Adonai has spoken only with Moshe? Hasn't he spoken with us too? Now, that's Numbers 12, 1 through 2. I cut that off on purpose. So there it is. That's the package. That's complete. Now, how do they relate to one another? Well, people often complain about God's leadership. They see it through men. They say, what's his plan? Where is he taking us? What is this about? Then there's an insatiable need for something you feel God is not providing. It could be anything. It could be healing. It could be your finances. It's burned into your body and you feel like God is not providing it, or he's not doing it fast enough. Lastly, the leaders of any assembly, not just here, and trust me, this is a problem all around the world. The leaders believe that they are best qualified to lead, and so they all want to step up and take the leadership. This dynamic will happen over and over again because the carnal mind is against God. But we have help in this fight. So wait for the closing arguments. I have personally experienced this sinful sickness. Sadly, I have to say that I was a part of it, spreading it. In the days following September 11th, the National Guard Armory, which was just basically a block away from my job, became an impromptu memorial wall. Every day I passed by the wall and people would post a new photograph asking if someone has seen this person. This went on day after day, week after week. I remember the first few days I would stop and read each one of those because I was looking for teachers and students who had disappeared from the classes. And as time went on, I tried not to look at the faces or the names. But every day, another face would stand out. And like a moth to a flame, I fell right into it again. Deep, deep sadness. I had long ago abandoned my faith, but now, here before me was irrefutable truth. All the scriptures about protection stalked me like distant shadows, just around the corner of my mind. All the things I had read about Jesus not being a historical figure, all of it came together and cast doubt in my mind. How could I square Jesus of Nazareth, a Jewish teacher, with creating the Roman faith that has swept the entire world? They don't fit somehow. I remember one day looking up at the tall buildings, looking past them into the sky, downtown Manhattan, and thinking and saying out loud to myself, if there is a God, I don't know what he's doing. And with that, I turned away. Those children of Israel and the mixed multitude had no vision of what Adonai was doing. All they could see was a lot of movement, packing up and moving again. They could see the pillar of cloud by day, and they could see the pillar of fire by night. They had food to eat and were not hungry. Because, if you remember correctly, they were trained to collect exactly what they needed, and if they were sufficient, it was provided for them. If it was deficient, it was provided for them. So no one was hungry. Put that picture in your head first. They simply did not believe Moses was taking them somewhere, to some place, to a new life. And they lacked faith in God, who was sustaining them every single day. So let's reread Numbers. Let's read number 1 from Numbers 11 again. The people were murmuring in the ears of Adonai about hardship And when Adonai heard, his anger burned. A few weeks after I audibly said to God, I don't know what you're doing, my department at City College began to downsize and diminish. I was faced with a decision. I had to let go 17 workers, and now it was down to me. My boss gave me a proposition: move into his office and become his assistant, and everything would be fine. But what's missing from the picture is that he had been sexually harassing me for over a year. So I refused to be his pet, and I lost my job as well. Little did I know that was the beginning of my journey. I couldn't see it yet. So let's look at number 2 in detail. Remember, number 2 is the craving in the body. The people, only a short time from being burned to death, began to disguise their spirit of rebellion with cravings, which were a complete lie. Remember, they said they began to have cravings, desires for things like meat, fish for free. They also desired cucumbers, luscious melons, I have the luscious, leeks, and my favorite, savory onions and garlic. But the people were well fed on manna. So there's a problem with some of these things. And what struck me as odd when I was reading the different Bible versions was the phrase, but now we have no appetite. So I had to read the original Hebrew for clarity. It turns out the complaining began right after the fire with the mixed multitude. We never discussed the mixed multitude. I realized that. I looked back and tried to see if I could find any discussions about the mixed multitude. We say virtually nothing. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of historical facts. It's likely there were slaves from all over the Middle East and Africa, because Egypt had the habit of conquering people and bringing people back as slaves. So they had slaves from the south, slaves from the north. And then you had that growing population, the sons of Israel. Free labor. Reflecting on this reading and reading on into the Exodus, reading and rereading the Exodus, and then considering that the children of Israel were mostly slaves, it also occurred to me, especially after rereading, that some of them were foremen. There was possibly an upper class, even among the slaves. And we also can't discount the fact that there were some Egyptians who left with the children of Israel. Some of those Egyptians came from households that had fish every day, and they did not catch it or prepare it. It just appeared on their tables. It was free. They had slaves to prepare it for them. The food was always free. So let's go back and look at that phrase again. The people were murmuring in the ears of Adonai about hardship. Slaves live in hardship. So there were some people in the mixed multitude who were not used to hardship, packing their possessions up, packing and moving every so often. So let's go forward. That mixed multitude was not just slaves, not just prisoners of war, but also some of the upper classes of Egypt and Ethiopia, and the foremen, the people who led the slaves, who were always provided food from Pharaoh's house. So most likely, slaves ate mutton and goat. Mostly on a special occasions, they would eat the goat. It would have been Egyptians and supervisors who had access to daily fish and savory onions and garlic. So now, this few, are out there causing trouble. And before long, the whole camp is thinking we had that stuff in Egypt, when in fact it's a lie. The slaves didn't have that stuff in Egypt. The people were longing for a lie in their bellies. Let's read it again. The mixed crowd that was with them grew greedy for an easier life. That's a different variation from what the Tree of Life said. The reason for that is the CJB, or the Complete Jewish Bible, was a little more faithful in the Hebrew in this case. The Hebrew states that it was a rabble, or a crowd of people who started this grumbling. This rabble infects everyone. It spreads through the camp like wildfire. Everybody's believing a lie. And of course Moses, who's just a man and the leader, was naturally disheartened by this virus that was spreading among the people, complaining about the food. And Maharat read that beautifully, so I'm not going to go back into that too much. I will just pick up at the end. Where can I get meat for all these people? For they wailed to me, saying, give us meat to eat. I'm not able to carry all these people by myself. The load is too heavy for me. If this is how you are treating me, kill me now. If I have found favor in your eyes, kill me, please. Don't let me see my own misery. From that statement, we get something that an organization that's a part of the faith that's still around to this day. This is the beginning of the 70 elders that we call the Sanhedrin. This is the beginning. This is how it started, with that one statement from Moses. See, it seems like these readings are just, meaningless scripts, stories going on. But the truth is they do have meaning, and they ripple into the modern day as well. Now, let's look back at this whole situation. We have people who are complaining, who are grumbling and complaining. Then we have people who are saying that they miss this meat, they need this meat. Should sound familiar, because that scenario plays out quite often in Israel. In the book of Samuel, the children of Israel are not happy. They go to Samuel the priest and demand he gives them a king. Look, here, keep in mind what we read in Numbers. Look, you have grown old, and your sons are not following your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations. Samuel was not pleased to hear them say this. Give us a king to judge us. So he prayed to Adonai. Adonai said to Samuel, listen to the people, to everything they say to you, for it is not you they are rejecting. They are rejecting me. They don't want me to be king over them. They are doing to you exactly what they have been doing to me from the day I brought them out of Egypt until today, by abandoning me and serving other gods. That's in 1 Samuel 8. Do you see how this is a pattern of behavior? The carnal mind does not want to be led by God. The whole grumbling and complaining thing was not against Moses. It was always against God. You see, sin has altered the human mind, and so it naturally rebels against God. Paul said it this way: but those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace, because the carnal mind is enmity against God. For it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. So then those who are in the flesh cannot please God. Romans 8. And again, in Ephesians, therefore I say this: indeed, in union with the Lord, I insist on it. Do not live any longer as the pagans live, with their sterile ways of thinking. Listen to this. Tell me this does not sound like modern intellects. With their sterile way of thinking, their intelligence has been shrouded in darkness, and they are estranged from the life of God. Because of the ignorance in them, which in turn comes from resisting God's will. People are turning away from places of worship in droves. They have lost, I've added that, they have lost all feeling. So they have abandoned themselves to sensuality, practicing any kind of impurity, and always greedy for more, never end. I'll say never satisfied. That's Ephesians 4. So what is the carnal mind? In science, among scientists, no one knows what is the mind. They focus on the brain. The funny thing about it is, when you lose your mind, you get angry, you feel it, and others around you know it. And yet we don't know where it comes from. In an article entitled Everything to Know About Your Internal Monologue, written by Kristen Cherney, on July 28, 2020, Ms. Cherney calls that voice in your head internal dialogue. The voice inside your head, or an inner voice, your internal monologue, is the result of certain brain mechanisms. You see, they focus on the brain, that cause you to hear yourself talking in your head without actually speaking and forming sounds. While an internal monologue is a common occurrence, not everyone experiences it. There's a lot that researchers have yet to uncover about why some people frequently hear an inner voice and what it means. My point is this, that it's that inner voice, the one that's always in the background, that's always wanting things, always guiding you like a little kid tugging at your rope. Buy this, buy that. Get this, get that. I do know that we don't know where it is, but I do know that that brain, that mind, is easily influenced by all the sexy things of the world, like good food, luxury cars, the latest makeup trend. People praises, that's a really good one. It has an amazing effect on young people and some adults as well. So does the thrill of speed, and last but not least, money. Whether it's paper or crypto or numbers in a bank account. John says in John 1, do not love the world or the things of the world. If someone loves the world, then love for the Father is not in him. Because all these things of the world, the desires of the old nature, the desires of the eyes, and the pretensions of life are not from the Father, but from the world. And the world is passing away, along with its desires. But whoever does God's will remain forever. That part of our minds that love bright, glittery things is the same part that's always ready to join the crowd. That part of you that says, yeah, let's go, let's do it. That carnal mind is always searching for some satisfaction. It can never find it. That's why we're always pulled this way or that way. Remember I said there were 3 events and I went through all 3 of those? Adonai gave the people what they wanted. And those who were excessively greedy died quickly. Just after this, an unbelieving rebellious group had been, just before that, an unbelieving rebellious group had been burned. And now the chief leadership happens to find reasons to assert itself. Miriam, Moses' sister, is actually his older sister. She was likely a teen when she sunk herself into the reeds along the banks of the Nile River and followed an infant in a blanket. When the baby was discovered by Pharaoh's daughter, she sprung out of the reeds and offered to find a Hebrew nurse to mother the child. It turns out it was her mother. Moses was approximately 80 years old when he went up against Pharaoh. Miriam would have had 10 to 15 years older, so she was about 95 at that time. Aaron was Moses' older brother. Miriam and Aaron began criticizing Moshe on account of the Ethiopian women he had married. Most of the translations say Miriam and Aaron began criticizing Moses, but I wanted to see what it would say in Hebrew. And the Hebrew says that they spoke out against Moses. And then the very next thing that seems to come out of their mouths is questioning who is greater, or in this case, aren't we equal? He spoke to us too. Here's something that we should always keep in our minds when we give into that carnal mind. Adonai heard them. In Numbers 12, they said, is it true that Adonai has spoken only with Moshe? Hasn't he spoken to us too? I'm going to go back. I'm going to go forward because we heard the reading, which was beautifully done. Suddenly, Adonai told Moshe, Aaron, and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tent of the meeting. The three of them went out. Adonai came down in the cloud and stood at the entrance to the tent. He summoned Aaron and Miriam, and they both went forward. And he said, listen to what I say. When there is a prophet among you, I, Adonai, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak to him, I speak with him in a dream. But it isn't that way with my servant Moses. He is the only one who is faithful in my entire household. With him I speak face to face and clearly, not in riddles. He sees the image of Adonai. So why aren't you afraid to criticize my servant Moshe? Then the anger flared up against him, and he left. I misread that. Then the anger of Adonai flared up against him, and he left. The cloud was removed from the tent, and that's when we noticed that Miriam had been struck by Tezrat. And I'm going to move on past Aaron's prayer and go pick up with Moses. Moses cried to Adonai, oh God, I beg you, please heal her. He's begging for his older sister. Adonai answered Moshe, if her father had merely spit in her face, wouldn't she hide herself in shame for 7 days? So let her be shut out from the camp for 7 days. And after that, she can be brought in. Remember what I said about how the camp moves? It is Adonai who tells the camp to move. So lest anyone speak ill of Miriam, consider while she was outside the camp, Adonai made everyone wait for her to return. Our thoughts are not hidden to God. Just as Yeshua knew the minds of those around him, how much more does he know our minds now that we have the Ruach of Elohim inside of us? We have an advocate in the heavens who defends us before our accusers. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 10, for though we walk in the flesh, we do not wage war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not fleshly, but powerful through God, for the tearing down of strongholds. I love that phrase, for the tearing down of strongholds. We are tearing down false arguments and every high-minded thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. We are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Messiah, ready to punish all disobedience whenever your obedience is complete. And that is where the power to overcome our carnal mind comes from submission to God, including all those thoughts in your head. How blessed is the man who perseveres through temptation, for after he has passed the test, he will receive as his crown the life which God has promised to those who love him. No one being tempted should say, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and God himself tempts no one. Rather, each person is being tempted whenever he is being dragged off and enticed by the bait of his own desire. You must be alert to the bait being fed to our carnal minds. Only you and God know what is your preferred bait. Continuing with James, then having conceived, the desire gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully grown, it gives birth to death. Don't delude yourselves, my dear brothers. James is not talking to new people here. He's talking to people who have been in the faith for a while. So what's the final verdict? We have been equipped with far greater tools to help us carry the sacred of God. The children of Israel are precious to Adonai. Many who perished will yet see light again. The greatest among them is Moses. Miriam and Aaron, Joshua and Caleb will also see the light of the prince entering from the eastern gate. Therefore, if there is any encouragement in the Messiah, if there is any comfort of love, if there is any fellowship of the Ruach, if there is any mercy and compassion, then make my joy complete by being of the same mind, having the same love, united in spirit with one purpose. Do nothing out of selfishness or conceit, but with humility consider others as more important than yourselves, looking out not only for your own interests, but also for the interest of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which was also in Messiah Yeshua. From Philippians chapter 2. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.